We're constantly told that the social housing system is broken, that it's a story of failure born from underfunding and incompetence. But what if that isn't the whole truth? Join me in a simple thought experiment. Let's imagine for a moment that a housing association actually succeeded. Let's call it the Phoenix Housing Association. Imagine that, through a radical overhaul, Phoenix Housing Association managed to successfully improve its homes, even while working with a reduced budget. It achieved this through streamlined processes, a relentless focus on competence, and a workforce that, while perhaps paid slightly less, was more efficient. The first question is simple. Why would this be good for tenants? The answer is obvious. Things would actually get fixed. The endless war of attrition over a leaking tap or a mouldy wall would be over. Trust would begin to be rebuilt. The relationship would shift from adversarial to functional. Now here's the second, more difficult and more important question. How would a trade union like UNIONS react to the success of the Phoenix Housing Association? As members of the industry, you'd expect them to celebrate it, wouldn't you, as a model of how to deliver better services for tenants. But the evidence suggests that the opposite would be true. The success of Phoenix Housing Association would be seen not as a miracle, but as an existential threat. Here's why. First, it would completely destroy their primary political narrative. The union's official position is that the crisis is a direct result of a lack of funding and the commercialisation of the sector, as UNITE itself has sold in its own reports. The problem is that housing associations must keep city investors happy over and above almost all other interests, quote. The Phoenix HA, by succeeding with less money and within the existing model, provides this argument is a lie. It proves that the problem was never the funding or the mould itself. The problem was a culture of incompetence and sometimes feigned incompetence, waste, and a lack of accountability. Phoenix's success is a direct living refutation of their entire ideological worldview. Second, it would annihilate their industrial bargaining position. The union's demand is always for more staff or better pay or working fewer hours. They've argued, as one report puts it, that failures are a consequence of, quote, under-resourcing of frontline teams. But the Phoenix HA is achieving better results with slightly lower pay and longer hours. This is an absolute nightmare for a union negotiator. It proves that the problem is not the quantity of staff or their pay packets, but the quality of the management and the efficiency of the process. And third, it destroys the frontline taboo. The union's narrative relies on the idea that frontline staff are powerless victims of a bad system. But the success of Phoenix Housing Association, built on competence and accountability of its own frontline, this proves that frontline staff can be effective when they're part of a functional system. The powerless victim alibi disappears. So how would a union react to the existential threat? It would almost certainly attempt to sabotage it, not with violence, but with process. It would use the very tools of industrial relations to destroy the efficiency that's making Phoenix successful. It would launch a campaign of grievances over the longer hours, grievances over the lower pay, arguing that Phoenix's success is built on the super exploitation of its workers. It would instruct its members to work to rule, forcing them to re-adopt the old, slow and inefficient processes that Phoenix had streamlined. This brings us to the conclusion. For a certain kind of ideological actor, the success of the system is a greater threat than its failure. A failing housing association is a political opportunity. It's Exhibit A in the argument for a completely different political model. A successful, efficient and tenant-focused housing association, however, is a political catastrophe. And it's this paradox that lies at the heart of why the system never seems to get any better. Because for some of the most powerful players in the game, a broken system is not a problem to be solved, it's a weapon to be wielded. Now let's be clear, it would probably have been better if the state had regained or retained full democratic control of social housing in the first place. And perhaps it's a fantasy to think that a housing association could ever succeed in the way that Phoenix HA here has. But that's not the point. The point is that faced with a hypothetical success story, a system that actually works for tenants, the union's institutional and ideological interests would force it to act as a saboteur. Why? The reasons are brutally simple. 1. A successful, efficient housing association disproves their core political argument that the non-council model is inherently unworkable. 2. It undermines their industrial bargaining position by proving that better results can be achieved without simply hiring more staff or providing better pay. And 3. It destroys the frontline taboo, proving that frontline staff can be held accountable for their performance, a position the union cannot and will never find acceptable. This is the final uncomfortable truth. Tenants are caught in a crossfire between two powerful and self-serving ideologies. On one side, a ruthless commercialisation that sees them as a line on a spreadsheet. On the other, a union-backed political movement that sees their suffering not as a problem to be solved, but as a political opportunity to be exploited. And that's why tenants need to be protected from both. They need protection from the fat cat, who sees them as a source of profit, and they need protection from the union. Strategists are likely to view the crumbling and dangerous home as a useful piece of propaganda. A shift is needed in the debate. We need to focus directly on the rights of tenants, the needs of tenants, and their position as consumers, who need to be protected and deserve the same protections as they would receive from any other industry.